Hi everyone, I'm Mr. Smith. It's Friday, Paraskevia. Today we're looking at our fourth noun declination in Georgian, the genitive case. This case, known as the Natesaob-it-i brunva, talks about the relationships of nouns, whether they describe each other, whether it's from that noun, whether it's of that noun, or whether it's simply something which we possess. That's the easiest way that we can understand it in English, but there are other dimensions that we need to explore. So if you're ready, let's go. Let's begin with my Instagram poster. Who can we see? Shota-s. What is he wearing? A hat. It's actually a woolen hat that he's wearing on his head. How much is it worth? Asi lari. And we're going to be talking today about the Natesaob-iti brunva, the fourth case in Georgian. Natesaob-iti brunva, at the heart, talks about the relationship of nouns. It's a genitive case, concretely. We have to step away from the English overemphasis that Natesaob-iti means possession, where you own something, which is our most simplest expression of the Natesaob-iti brunva. But not only did Shota talk about relationships in a deeply profound way that's now hard-coded into modern Georgian, we have to understand that the genitive case talks about the relationships between nouns, not the ownership or possession of it exclusively. Although we can see it in our example, it's not completely confined to our example. So let's look at his kudi, Kudia, it is a hat. Is shota-s, mart-qlis, kudia. Is, that, shota-s, his name is Shota, genitive s, it's shota-s, it belongs to him, it's his hat, kudi, aris. But I wanted to include one other thing, that it's made of wool. Mart-qli. Mart-qli is the material, and it's a noun, isn't it? So it's a person and a hat and wool. How do we bring them together? We use the Natesaob-iti brunva. It shows the relationships, either possession or what it's made of. So is, aris, shota-s, mart-qlis, kudi. That is Shota's woolen hat. We could even pull it apart and say that this is the hat of Shota that is made of wool. That of, here repeated, is where English does include the genitive case without exclusively being possessive. That hat does not possess the wool, but it has a relationship because it's made of wool, and so on. The next thing which I'd just like to highlight is that s, aris, ormot-stati lari. Is, aris, asilari. Es, tamar mepea. Is, shota-s. Es, is. Es, is. I didn't really want to do a whole lesson dedicated to this, but I just want you to show that if it's with me, es, if it's over there, is. Es, aris, ormot-stati lari. Is, aris, asi lari. Is, aris, shota-s. Is, shota-s. Is, shota-s, mart-qlis, kudia. Right here. Now let's go deeper into the name of this case, because it really reveals what this case is all about. It will be our instrumental case from last week, and so it's with Natesaoba. Natesaoba is the inherent relationship you have with a thing or a person. Indeed, Natesaoba as a root, Natesa, extends then to a relative of mine. So, es chemi Natesavia, this is a relative of mine. So we can see here that if we perhaps look further into the concept of relationship, that inexplicable existential relationship, then we're getting closer to the Georgian concept of genitive. Is, aris, kudi. Is, kudia. We're looking at that white one over here. That is a hat. Is, aris, mart-qlis, kudi. Is, aris, mart-qlis, kudi. It is a hat of wool. Actually, it's made with teka, which is felt, which of course is just mashed together wool into a fabric. So we could just look at it. I don't want to go into the names of every fabric. It's woolen. Okay, so mάτqლის kudi is what it is. The point is that if I remove the wool from that hat, then the hat doesn't exist anymore. And so the Natesaob-ით-i ბრუნვა expresses the existential relationship of that hat and the material that it's made of. You can see where I'm going here. Let's take a look at another picture of Shota Rustaveli. Es არის shota. We're looking at him now. Es shota. It's the same thing. I'm just really doubling down on this nice gold a, which substitutes aris, which is used in the name of my channel, paraskeria, just to illustrate that point a bit further. So, es shota Rustavelia. Here we're going back to our genitive. He's famous for wearing a hat. Es shota-s kudija. Es shota-s kudija. This is Shota's hat. Es shota-s mატყლის kudija. Es shota-s mატყლის kudija. It's Shota's hat of wool, bringing the genitive together. The next slide we will look at how to form the genitive and how it's s here and is so on, but let's just look a little bit deeper into our banknote, because if you look really carefully, right at the top, we can see Sakatvelos erovnuli banki. Sakatvelos erovnuli banki. Georgia's national bank. If we go into the finer print with this signature here, we've got erovnuli bankis presidenti. Erovnuli bankis presidenti. So in the first case, it was Georgia's national bank. In the second case, it's the president of the national bank. So we can see here that in both cases, the genitive was used on the money. So every time you even doubt that you've got it gripped, just take a look at this and just remember exactly what the core concept really means. Slide 3 shows us that we're kind of already doing this in English, but it's really old school, right? Showing us that in Old English, this was something that did exist, but it's very prevalent in Georgian and in other languages too. So in English, we get who and we put an S and it becomes whose and its possession. In Georgian, we get vin, we use visi, and we get whose. So similar. So visi mankana es. Whose car is this? And it's all about possession. If we look at this one, which is vistvis, this question is actually more about for whom. It's about necessarily the potential possession, but it is for you or for me or for him. It is actually the Natesaob-ით-i ბრუნვა as well. So vistvis am poemas. Who are you writing that poem for? For whom are you writing that poem? So the word who has a suffix m, and that indicates that possession, or indeed the relationship between the writing and its final destination. One thing, of course, we're going to look at is how the ending of the word, the noun, has a different suffix. If it's I, O, U, or a name, just add an S. Those four are pretty constant. If it's A or E, then those have to go, and you add is and is to whatever the word is. These ones stay the same. Small disclaimer. Officially, the rule is that if the word ends in a consonant, then that's the pudze, that's the root. That root then gets is, right? But the word is never ever expressed as a pudze. So I found it very frustrating that you take the consonant word, you add an I, you take the same I away, then you add the same I back again, and then you add an S, but it's adding an IS even though you've just removed the I anyway. I found it to be very unpragmatic. So this does go in contrast a little bit to standard descriptions of how to do this case, but trust me, if it ends with an I, just add an S. Don't remove the I and then add the I again and say that you're adding IS, because it just doesn't make any sense. You haven't necessarily removed the I, wherein this is what the confusion is that these actually simply disappear, not reappear again. That's a pet peeve, but you can see what I'm saying. Let's look at some examples. So, Ioannis mankana. This is Ioannis' car. It's a name, it ends with an E, we don't have to do anything to it. This is chemi da. Now, da is not a name, It's a word, it's a noun. It ends with an A, that disappears. Chemi dis mankana, my sister's car. The invention of the car is the extension of our genitive. Mankana is a noun, ends with an A. Mankanis gamogoneba. The invention of the car. So although I did introduce something a little bit unorthodox with my new interpretation of the way to use the pudze I nouns that don't end in I but should end in I, that always end in I, that whatever, try to follow this formula and I won't steer you wrong. Slide 4, let's practice what we've just learned, and in the most unusual way, that in Georgian, if you want to talk about your mother, you're going to have to say mother mine, and it's one word. So we follow the rule, but remember that chemi deda is a mistake. Here we're going to say mati dedi. We're going to use the word order that we're quite familiar with in English, and I'll get back to that. But in here, actually, deda chemi is one word. It ends with an I, put the S. Esar is deda chemi's mankana. That's my mother's car. Of course, it ends with an E, no? The idea, of course, that I was trying to show is that it actually ends with an M. That's the pudze. And so the M adds the is. You somehow add the I, remove the I, put the same I back again, and then you have to do it. It just is far too redundant for me. In this case, I understand entirely, but this one I really don't. So anyway, esar is deda chemis mankana. Deda shenis daba debis treya. It's the day of your mother's birth. It's her birthday, right? So, sheni deda shenis daba debis treya. It's a question. The next one. Es dedamisis bilis jagrisia. It's her mother's toothbrush. Now, just remember that this toothbrush is not made of teeth. It's made for teeth. So here we can see, of course, that the possessive on bili is not saying that the brush is made from teeth. Can you think of anything more disgusting? We have to remember that often the object is described by the noun that has the genitive suffix. So it is a brush for your teeth. Here in English, it is a compound noun. So it's a toothbrush. So Georgian and English, they're deciding when do we press the words together, when do we open them together, which way do we put them. It's a little bit of a conundrum, but that's what we're going to use. This is the correct structure. They both end in an I, they both need an S. Ah, of course, aris. Es tetachvenis gasagebia. That's our mum's key. That's quite simple. Again, gasagebia. Just remember, gasagebia means that I understand something, that I fully comprehend something. But the gasagebia is a key. Okay, so you're in a social situation and you think that this phone belongs to that guy's mum. So you say, Iste tatquenis teleponiachom. Iste tatquenis teleponiachom. Isn't that your mum's telephone? I'm quite sure it is. I need you to confirm whether I'm right or wrong in a very polite way. The last one is just for pleasure, is that this structure uses deda, which ends in an a, so it needs the is, right? We have to lose the a. Es mati dedi samsachuris teleponia. This is a work phone. It is a phone for work. It is not a phone of work. So, samsachuris teleponia. Es mati dedis samsachuris teleponia. That's their mum's work phone. So in these examples, I've used the genitive not to say what something's made of, but indeed what it's for. And if we remember the example, who was the poem for? Tamaristvis. Then we can see that it's not always an of, it's not always a possession. In English, we might use for. Last slide, and we're going to allow shota-s to finish today's concept and introduce next week's tutorial. So, vin mokvaresa ar edzebs igi tavisa materia. Tavisa mteria, your own enemy. That's our genitive. But next week we're doing dative. And of course, the S is used in the dative too. So the main difference is that edzebs is a transitive verb. You're looking for something. In this case, you're not looking for something. Now, let me just give you a little bit of background here. This is where Avtandil and Tariel in the story are discussing their bromance because they've got each other's backs. They've built and fostered this friendship, this you become my mokware instead of my muteri. Here I've got friend or foe here as a translation into sort of Old English, let's say. And so what you're looking for are these loved ones that they've got your back and you feel protected. And if you're not doing that at all, then you become your own enemy. You're at a disadvantage if you don't care about relationships. Here is the plural of these. So mokvrebi are loved ones. This is often also used to apply to parents-in-law. Again, relationships that you have, a relationship that you foster, people that will eventually have your back if you play it right. If you don't bother, then you're your own enemy, aren't you? If you wage a war with your parents-in-law, it's going to backfire. And then mutrebi, enemies. You don't really need much more of a definition for that. So let's just let Shota end this with this famous quote once again. Vin mo kvaresa ar edzebs igi tavisa materia. That's the last slide of today, and as promised, next week we're looking at the dative case, the third case in the list, and we are looking at how verbs now interact with the nouns that we're declining. So, have a nice weekend, have a nice Christmas, and I'll see you then. Bye!